Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to be doing chemistry. Paper 2, multiple choice. This is the October-November 2020. We have 45 minutes, so let's go. Question number 1. Which gas has the slowest rate of diffusion? Well, remember when you see the word diffusion, I want you to be instantly thinking of MR or the molar mass. The molar mass. So, let's see H2. So if we have to use the periodic table to find the MR, and it's basically its mass number. So H2 is basically there are 2 H atoms, so there are 2 grams per mole. For NH3 we have 17 grams per mole. For methane we have 16 grams per mole. For carbon dioxide we have 44 grams per mole. Remember, when the MR is higher, the rate of diffusion is slower. So it has an inverse proportion, therefore D is the correct answer. Question number 2. A chromatography experiment is carried out to analyze the pigments present in 4 different types of leaf. Okay, so the student basically forgot to complete his tables of result. Well, so when you see this table, you are bombarded with these all sorts of informations, such as the number of pigments, the distance traveled by, the RF value. There are just too much words to look at here. But if we look at them one by one, I'm sure we'll be able to solve it if you know the basis of chromatography. Okay, so the table, we have to look at them in rows, which I'll draw them. Okay, so let's look at F first. So for F, it is under the column of the number of pigments identified. We don't know how many number of pigments there are, so we write F. However, there are colors of identified pigments. However, we have seen there are green and yellow. There are both of them. So this means this F, the numbers of pigment has to be 2. So there's only 2 identified, so A or C. Okay, so F is easily done. Let's look at G. So G says it is under the column of distance traveled by the solvent front. So we don't know the distance traveled by the solvent. However, we do know its RF value and the distance traveled by the pigment or the substance. And therefore, remember, the RF value is basically the ratio of the distance traveled by the solvent, distance traveled by the substance, over distance traveled by the solvent. So we can find distance traveled by the solvent by rearranging the equation. Okay, so if we rearrange the equation, the distance traveled by solvent is going to be the distance traveled by the substance of the pigment, which is 2.5 over the RF value, which is 0.78. Okay, let me put that in the calculator real quick. Okay, this is going to be 3.205, and so it's basically 3.2 rounded to 1 decimal place. So there's 3.2 in the table, so let's take that off. Okay, we have to find H. So H is here, under it is yellow, so we have, and is under the column of the RF value. So basically we have to find the RF value of this yellow pigment. Okay, we can find the yellow pigment based again on this formula again. RF value is equal to distance traveled by the substance over distance traveled by the solvent. So if we find the RF value, we can just substitute the numbers in. The distance traveled by the substance is 3, and the distance traveled by the solvent is 3.5. Now this is going to give us an answer of 0.857. This is basically 0.86. So there we go. C is the correct answer. Question number 3. Which statement about isotopes is correct? They have different numbers of proton number. No, they have same number of proton numbers. They have different chemical properties. No, they have similar chemical properties. They have the same nuclear number. Absolutely not. They have different nuclear numbers. Okay, so that leaves us with D. They have same number of electrons in the outer shells, and this is correct. Question number 4. In the chromatography experiment shown, which label represents the solvent front? The solvent front is represented by A. So let's just label. This is the pigment that is dissolved with the solvent, and C is the solvent, D is the baseline, which is marked by a pencil, and A is the solvent front. Okay, so A is the correct answer. Question number 5. Different methods of separation rely on substances having different properties. Which property of distillation make use of? Well, distillation, it makes use of the boiling point. So it could be fractional distillation, which you make use of the boiling point. Question number 6. The arrangements of the electrons in two ions formed from element X and Y are shown. Which equations represent the reaction between element X and Y? Okay, so we are given the proton number, and we also given the electron number. But remember, okay, we're given the electron number as well. Okay, so we can count how many electrons there are, and they're basically two ions formed. So the elements X and Y, elements, as you know, they are neutral, and so the number of protons has to be equal to the number of electrons. So we can count the number of electrons. Just let's write them in the electronic configuration. So there's going to be 2.8.8. So they form two ions, which are X and Y. Okay, so there are 2.8.8. Okay, so they basically have the full outer shell electrons, and they have complete electronic configuration. So we have to find the reaction that causes these both. Okay, so before we do that, we have to actually consider the elements itself before it becomes the proton. So remember, the proton, if they are neutral, the elements are neutral, so it has to equal to the same number of electrons. So the electrons of X is originally is 19. The electrons of P originally is 17. So when we write it in the configuration form, it's going to be 2.8.9. This is going to be 2.8.1. This is going to be 2.8.7. So we need one more electron in the outer shell to make it a complete, and we have to get one electron out of the shell so that it can become 2.8.8, and so this one also could become 2.8.8. And so we have to write each other's charge. So X needs one more. X basically gives out one electron, so Y basically also gains one electron. So basically the compound would be XY. Okay, and so because the element X loses one electron, it becomes positively charged, while the element Y gains one electron, which means it gains a negative charge to become a negatively charged. So X is going to be positive, Y is going to be negative. So X is a metal, likely a metal from the group 1 group, because it has only one outer shell electrons. So it's not going to be this diatomic. It's not going to be a molecule. So C and D. And Y is a non-metal because it is from the group 7, which is the halogen group. And so they are usually found in pairs of 2, which means they are a diatomic element. Therefore, C is the correct answer. Question number 7. Which rules identify compounds that contains single covalent bonds, double covalent bonds, or only single and double covalent bonds? Well, for the single covalent bonds, we can see that the alcohol group is single covalent, and this means that they don't contain any double bond, carbon-carbon double bond. However, the double covalent bond only, it is the carbon dioxide. Ethene does contain a double covalent because they are from the family alkenes, but it says, remember, read the question carefully, it says only. So carbon has a double bond with each atom of oxygen, so it looks something like this. So both single and double covalent ones. This is ethene. Ethene has one double bond and another single bond, and therefore C is the correct answer. Question number 8. Ethyl methanoate, HCO, burns in excess oxygen to produce carbon dioxide and water. The equation is shown. What is the value of X? Well, remember, to find this, we just have to balance the equation. So there are two types. There are 4 oxygen on the right left hand side, and there are 12 and 6, 12, 6. This gives us 18 oxygen in the right hand side. So we want to find the number of oxygen molecules. So there are 4 oxygen, so we just have to minus it. 18 minus 4 is equal to 14, and because this 14 is equal to O2, one oxygen atom is going to become 7. So the X has to be 7, and therefore B is the correct answer. Rubidium is in the group 1 of the periodic table. Bromine is in group 7. Rubidium reacts with bromine to form ionic compound. Which row shows the electron charge change taking place for rubidium and the correct formula of rubidium ion? Remember, rubidium is a metal, and which means a metal, it always forms a cation, which means they always form a positively charged ion. And so if they form a positively charged ion, the electron is going to be lost. So the formula is going to be Rb plus 1. Okay, so C is the correct answer. Question 10. Which statement explains why graphite is used as a lubricant? Well, this is because the layers, remember the layers, the hexagonal layers of graphite can slide over each other. They can basically slide over each other, and that's why we use graphite in pencils. And layers in the structure can slide over each other, therefore D is the correct answer. Question number 11. The relative atomic mass of chlorine is 35.5. When calculating a relative atomic mass, the AR, which particle is the mass of chlorine atom compared to? Well, every mass of chlorine atom, or in fact any atom, is compared to an atom of carbon 12. So 12 grams of carbon 12, so C is the correct answer. You have to learn that by heart. Question 12. Universal indicator solution is added to a neutral solution of concentrated aqueous sodium chloride. The solution, which contains hydrogen ion, sodium ion, chloride ion, and hydroxide ion, is electrolyzed. The product at the cathode is the hydrogen gas, and the product at the anode is chlorine gas. What happens to the color of the indicator in the solution during electrolysis? Well, so the H plus and the Cl minus is selectively discharged, and this leaves the solution with only the sodium ions and the hydroxide ions, and when they add together, they are going to form a solution, an alkaline solution, which is sodium hydroxide, which is an alkali, and you could call it a base as well, and therefore a base will turn the universal indicator blue. And so from a neutral standpoint, firstly it was neutral, which means the universal solution was green, so it's going to turn from green to blue. This means the color changes from green to blue. C is the correct answer. Question 13. What is the empirical formula of the oxide of iron formed by reacting 2.4 grams of iron with 0.96 gram of oxygen? Okay, for this question you have to find the empirical formula. It is very easy. I like to use the table method. Okay, so firstly we have to find let's use this formula. Firstly, write down the elements Fe and oxygen. Let's write down, first of all, let's find the mass. The mass is given in the question. This is 2.24, and oxygen is 0.96. Now let's find the MR, or the molar mass. So the molar mass of iron is 56 grams per mole. The molar mass of oxygen is 16 grams per mole. So then we can find the mole. So the mole is, okay, so 2.24 divided by 56, this is going to give us 0.04 moles. And the oxygen is going to give us 0.96 divided by 16, this is going to give us 0.06. Now we can divide this by the smallest number, which is 0.0, divide by the smallest mole, which is 0.04. We're going to divide them by 0.04, this is going to give us 1, and 0.06 divided by 0.04 is going to give us 1.5. Now remember, 1.5 is not a whole number, so we are going to multiply the whole by 2. So this is going to give us 2, 3. So there's going to be there's going to be 2 Fe atoms and 3 oxygen. And therefore we get the empirical formula of Fe2O3. Therefore C is the correct answer. Question 14. The combustion of methane is exothermic. Which statement about this reaction is correct? Okay, if it's exothermic, remember the energy needed, basically bond making is more than the bond breaking. So basically the energy needed to break the bonds, okay, let's read the options. The energy needed to break the bonds in methane and oxygen is greater than the energy released in new bonds, which is bond making in carbon dioxide and water. This is absolutely false, because what this is describing is the endothermic reaction, which is the opposite change. The energy needed to break the bonds in methane and oxygen is less than the energy, which means the energy released in bond making has to be bigger than the bond breaking, which is exactly as I've told you before. So this is an exothermic reaction, so B is the correct answer. Okay, question number 15. Hydrogen reacts with oxygen in the fuel cell. The reaction is exothermic. 286 kilojoules of energy is released for every mole of water formed. Which volume of hydrogen gas measured at room temperature and pressure, this is RTP, would react with oxygen with the release of 7,000 joules of energy? So we know that for every mole of water formed, 286 kilojoules of energy is going to be released or produced. So let's write that down here. So 286 kilojoules is basically 286,000 joules for every 1 mole of water. So but then in the question it says there is only 7,000 joules of energy released for every something moles of water. So we want to know the moles of water, which is 7,000 joules if it had released 7,000 joules. So how much is it? So using mathematics, we can know that 7,000 divided by 286,000 is going to give us an answer of 0.02447. Basically, it's going to give us 0.0247 moles. So that is that. And remember, now after we have done that, from the equation there's the ratio. Now we want to find the hydrogen gas. So the water ratio, the hydrogen gas is basically 2:2. Basically it's 1:1. And this means that if there is 0.0247 moles of water formed from the release of 7,000 joules, then there would also be 0.0247 moles of hydrogen formed. So the moles of water and hydrogen are the same due to the fact that they have the same mole ratio. And okay, because they have the same mole ratio, we want to find their volume. Remember, the mole is equal to volume over 24 dm cube, or the molar volume. So the volume is equal to mole multiplied 24. We know the mole of hydrogen is the same as the water mole, so it's going to be 0.024 blah 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 multiplied by 24. And now if I put that into my calculator, it's going to give us something of the sorts of 0.587 dm cube, because this is 24 is dm cube, and so dm cube. And when we turn it into centimeter cubes, remember 1 dm cube is 1000 cm cube, and therefore it's going to be 587 centimeter cube of hydrogen that is going to be produced, and therefore A is the correct answer. Okay, so this was a little tricky. It wasn't really that tricky, but you know, you could get by. So A is the correct answer. Question 16. Which substance do not require oxygen in order to produce energy? Remember, the coal needs oxygen. In other words, it has to combust to produce energy. Hydrogen as well, it has to react with oxygen, and this is why it's called the hydrogen fuel. It is used as rocket fuel. Natural gas is basically methane. Methane, remember, is a hydrocarbon, and hydrocarbons react with oxygen. This is called combustion, and so they produce energy. But however, uranium does not require oxygen to produce energy. They rely on the splitting of the atomic nuclei to produce energy. Okay, question 17. Nitrogen and hydrogen can be converted into ammonia using a catalyst. What is the purpose of the catalyst? Remember, when you see the word catalyst, it is always to increase the rate of reaction. Therefore, B is the correct answer. Question 18. Ammonia is produced by the Haber process. The equation is shown. The forward reaction is exothermic. Which statement is correct? So forward is exo. This means that the backward reaction is endo. Okay, let's look at the options. Increasing pressure decreases the yield of ammonia. So there are 4 moles on the left hand side, and there are 2 moles on the right hand side. So if you increase the pressure, the equilibrium is going to shift to the right, because it's going to go from the side with more molecules or more moles to the side with less moles or less molecules. And so the yield of ammonium is going to be high. So this is wrong, because it has to increase the yield of ammonium. Okay, increasing the temperature decreases the yield of ammonia but speeds up the rate of reaction. Okay, now the pressure is done. We have to know the exo and endo. Okay, so increasing temperature, remember, temperature favors the endothermic change. A favors the endothermic change, and so the backward reaction is the endothermic change, and therefore the ammonia is being converted back to the reactants. The equilibrium is converting them back to the reactants, and this means it decreases the yield of ammonia. However, increasing temperature also means that it increases the speed of reaction. Therefore, B is the correct answer. Question 19. The manufacture of sulfuric acid, sulfur dioxide, is converted to sulfur trioxide. What type of reaction is this? Well, this is oxidation, obviously, because you can see SO2 is being converted to SO3. You can notice the number under the SO2 and the number on sulfur trioxide. You can see that an oxygen atom has increased, and when we say that, remember that an increase in oxygen atoms means it is oxidation. Therefore, C is the correct answer. Question 20. The equation for the redox reaction is shown. Which element is reduced here? Well, we can see clearly that the chlorine atom, the chlorine is being reduced, because the chlorine with itself, in the element itself, has an oxidation state of 0. And in here, we can see that chlorine has a -1 charge, and so this is a negative, this is a decrease in oxidation state. If it's a decrease in oxidation state, this means that it is reduction has taken place and it is reduced. Therefore, A is the correct answer. 21. The equation shows the reaction between aqueous hydrogen bromide and aqueous ammonia. Okay, which statement describes the role of aqueous bromide? Remember, aqueous bromide, hydrogen bromide, is basically the same group from chlorine, and they are from the group 7 group, the halogens. And so in this case, think of it as hydrochloric acid. It is basically the same thing, but maybe less reactive than hydrochloric acid. So like, yeah, hydrogen bromide, it is acting as an acid here, and ammonia, it is acting as a base here. So what is happening here? It is a proton donor because it is an acid. Therefore, D is the correct answer. Question 22. The equations for 3 reactions are shown. Which reactions are suitable for making a salt by precipitation? Remember, for precipitation, you need 2 aqueous salts or 2 soluble salts. And when you mix the 2 aqueous or soluble salts together, you will form an insoluble salt, and this is called precipitation method. This is one of the methods to make salts, insoluble salts. And so here we know that, okay, there are 2 salts in option 1, and then it creates a solid, which is basically an insoluble salt. So this seems to be the correct answer as well. Okay, let's check the other options. Okay, by precipitation, okay, this is one of the answers correct. And the other one, we can see that in option number 3, we cannot see in the products that in the state symbols, we have to look for the solid symbols when it means precipitation, because it is insoluble. And so we can see that the silver iodide is insoluble as well, and this is done by 2 aqueous solution or 2 different salts. Yep, so 1 and 2, therefore A is the correct answer. Question 23. Zinc oxide, ZnO, is an amphoteric oxide. Which rules describe the reaction of oxide? What is the meaning of amphoteric oxide? Well, this means that they react with both base and acid, or alkali and acid, and so it's going to be A. Question 24. A student carries out an experiment to prepare pure magnesium sulfate crystals. The diagram shows the first stage of the preparation. He adds the magnesium carbonate until no more reacts. Which process should he use next? Adding magnesium until no more reacts, meaning he is adding in excess, and when you add in excess, you have to remove it when the reaction is done. And how do you remove the insoluble? By the way, magnesium carbonate is insoluble. You have to know your solubility rules. It is very important to nail your chemistry paper. So please take note of your solubility rules and stuff. Okay, so he adds excess. So that is something that you have to figure it out from the question. Until no more reacts, which means basically he adds excess. And how do we remove this insoluble excess? Well, we use a filter funnel, and this method is called filtration. Therefore, C is the next step. 25. Which rules about the elements in the periodic table is correct? Let's look at statement 1. 2 elements in the same group have similar chemical properties. This is correct. Metals are on the left of the table. This is also correct. Remember, metals in the periodic table are on the left, and the non-metals are on the right. And in the middle of the periodic table lies the transition element. Okay, 26. A new element, oxfordium, OX, obviously this is not real, or was discovered with the following properties. In which group of the periodic table should the new elements be placed? Okay, it is insoluble in water. Okay. It does not conduct electricity. Okay, so this gives a very large clue that it is a nonmetal. And then it has a diatomic oxide, and it has a triple covalent bond. It has a triple covalent bond. That means it shares 3 electrons each. Now this means they must have an outer shell. They need an outer shell of 3 electrons. And they are non-metal, so this could only mean that they are in group 5 of the periodic table. Because remember, nitrogen has a triple bond to a nitrogen gas, and 2 is bonded triple bond to another nitrogen atom, and it does not conduct electricity, and it's not soluble in water in normal circumstances. Therefore, B is the correct answer. Question 27. A flammable gas needs to be removed from a tank at the industrial plant. For safety reasons, an inert gas is used. Inert meaning reactive. And so which gas is suitable? This is argon. Because argon is from the group 0 or group, we call it group 8 nowadays. Group 8. Okay, 28. Transition elements can have variable oxidation states. Which pair of compounds show a transition element in 2 different oxidation states? Remember, there's a very cheap way or very cheap trick to do this. This is to look at the charge underneath. So if I write Cr2O3, the charge of Cr is underneath oxygen, and the charge of oxygen is actually underneath Cr. So if you look at them, you can compare the oxidation states. Okay, let's look at this. Now Cr has an oxidation state of 3, and Cr also has an oxidation of 3, so this means they have the same. It needs a different oxidation state. Now let's look at option B, Cu2O. There Cu has an oxidation state of 1, and CuCO3. Remember, the carbonate ion is 2 minus. If it's 2 minus, copper has to be 2 plus, and therefore the copper has an oxidation state of +2 and a +1, and this means that they are different, therefore B is the correct answer. 29. Which diagram best represents the structure of a substance that is a good conductor of electricity at 25 degrees Celsius? Okay, a good conductor of electricity. Remember that, let's look at the structures. A is a diamond. B is, it looks like some sort of hydrocarbon. Okay, so they are both nonmetals, which means they do not conduct electricity. The ionic compound, they do conduct electricity, but remember, they only conduct electricity only when they are molten, or when they are liquefied, or when they are in the aqueous state, when the ions can move freely. But 25 degrees Celsius is at room temperature, and this means they has to be at solid, and therefore D is the only reasonable choice. And if you look at the structure as well, it is the structure of an alloy, which is a metal, mixture of metals. 30. Why is aluminum metal unreactive with air? Well, this is because there is a layer of aluminum oxide that is forming, therefore it does not react with acids and water easily due to this aluminum oxide, so A is the correct answer. 31. The apparatus used for the extraction of aluminum oxide by electrolysis is shown. Which equations represent a reaction taking place at the anode? Remember, the anode is basically the positive electrode, and so the anion or the negative charged ions will go to the anode part. Okay, the negatively charged ions in here would be the oxygen. Remember, there's solution of molten aluminum oxide. Aluminum oxide contains the ion Al3 plus and O2 minus. And remember, the anion will go to the anode, and therefore the anion is going to undergo oxidation. Remember, NOx, this is the acronym you remember it by, to form oxygen gas at the anode in this part, and therefore A is the B is the reasonable answer. Question 32. The results of the test on solid S and aqueous solution are shown. What is S? Okay, so this requires you to know the qualitative chemistry. You have to know the change, the conditions, how they will. You have to know the results, the conclusions, and the colors as well. Okay, a brown gas is given off together with a gas which reacts a glowing splint, which means NO2 is given off, and oxygen is also given off. NO2 color is brown, and oxygen relates a glowing splint. This is what you have to memorize. The effect of sodium hydroxide would precipitate, soluble in excess. The effect of aqueous ammonium would white precipitate. It is also soluble in excess. This means if both are soluble, then this means this is a zinc, pardon me. This is a zinc ion, Zn2 plus ion. Okay, so this has to be a zinc compound. Okay, and because it gives off this nitrogen dioxide, it has to be a nitrate. And therefore, D is the correct answer. 33, part of the carbon cycle is shown, which processes P, Q, and R. Okay, so the carbon dioxide, so the glucose is being turned into carbon dioxide. And this is due to the reaction of respiration, in which glucose reacts with oxygen to give off carbon dioxide and water vapor. Okay, and the carbon dioxide is feeding to the plant. The plant feeds on the carbon dioxide, and this means the plant is taking in carbon dioxide. How? This is by photosynthesis, and then the plant returns the carbon in the form of methane. This means it is decomposing. Therefore, B is the correct answer. Question 34. The element sulfur is found in a number of different minerals. Which mineral contains the greatest percentage by mass of sulfur? Remember, you just have to find the sulfur mass over the whole compound. This is the general formula. And then you multiply it by 100%. So that's basically it. You have to do it for every single one of them. And so it turns out, okay, let's do it. Let's go from the bottom. FeS2, iron sulfide or pyrite. Okay, so remember the sulfur molar mass is 32. You'll be given the periodic table for that. And then the compound of FeS2, you have to find the molar mass of the whole compound. So Fe is basically 56, and then there is 2s. This means 32 is being times 2. And you have to multiply this by 100%. Okay, if we put that in the calculator, this is going to result in 26, wait a minute. This is going to result in 26.6%. And so D is the correct answer. 35. Which structure represents a molecule of ethanol? Well, ethanol, remember, is from the alcohol family, and it contains the hydroxyl group, the OH group. So we have to find the OH group, and here we go. And they don't contain any double bonds, so we can scratch that off, leaving us with C. 36. Which structures are structural isomers of each other? Okay, so when I look at this immediately, I can see that 1, 2, and 4 are basically the same thing. But the difference between 1, 2, and 4 is that 1 is linear, it's a linear structure, but 2 and 4 has a branch structure. Although they are the same substance, they are just branched. This means that 1, 2, and 4 are the same, and they are not isomers of each other. However, if you look at number 3, you can see that it is an isomer because the methyl group chain is under the second carbon. If you look at the option number 2, you can see that the methyl group is on the first carbon atom, which is the same as this one, which is in the first carbon atom. This one also, it is on the first carbon atom, and therefore they are the same thing. 1, 2, and 4 is the same thing, but the difference is 1 and 3 are different, and therefore they are structural isomers of each other. 37. Which molecule is not reproduced by addition reaction of ethene? Okay, not produced. So remember that ethene is an alkene. It will go on addition reaction. Okay, so it can produce ethane, and ethane can be produced to ethane by adding hydrogen. This is called hydrogenation. Ethene can be turned into ethanol by adding steam, by reacting with steam. And ethene can be reacted with bromine to form an alkano bromine or bromide ion compound. Basically the bromine atoms become part of the structure. So it's going to be, it can go in 3 different ways. So it can produce into ethane. This is A is correct. It can produce into bromine molecule. It can also be produced into ethanol. This is correct. But it cannot be produced into propane because there is no carbon atom element. There is an extra carbon atom element. Because ethane is C2H4, it only has 2 carbon atoms. How the hell do you get C2 to C3? It doesn't make sense. It's completely rubbish. Therefore, D is the correct answer. 38. The flowchart shows the preparation of ethanol and some important chemistry of ethanol. What are X, Y, and Z? Okay, typical question. Substance X undergoes fermentation to produce ethanol. Well, the substance is glucose. And ethanol, by the process Y, produces carbon dioxide and something. This process is called combustion, in which it reacts with oxygen to produce carbon dioxide and steam, or water vapor, if you would like to call it. 39. Which statement about nylon and terylene is correct? Remember, nylon is a polyamide. Terylene is a polyester. Okay. Nylon and terylene are made from the same monomers with CC bonds. They are not made from the same monomers. Nylon and terylene contain the same linkage. No, nylon, as it is a polyamide, it contains the amide linkage. Terylene, it is a polyester, so it contains an ester linkage. Nylon is a polyester. Nope, nylon is a polyamide. Terylene is made from 2 different monomers. This is absolutely correct because this is condensation polymerization. 40. Next question. Which diagram represents the structure of a protein? Okay, a protein, it has a general formula of let me draw out this general formula. It has a general formula of So this is a general formula of a protein molecule. This R represents a side chain, because remember, protein is made up of different amino acids. So different amino acids have different side chains. So yeah, we have to find the monomer that looks like this. NH, on one side it has an amine group, on the other side it has a carboxylic acid group. Yeah, so we have to find that, and we have to find the amide linkage. Let's look at option A. Option A is not protein, but it is nylon, because let's look at the monomers. The monomers are dicarboxylic acid and diamine. This is completely wrong. Let's look at option B is completely wrong because of the wrong linkage. Option C as well. Option D, however, let's look at it. Has on one side it has an amine group, on the other side it has a carboxylic acid group, and they have different side chain. You can see it is represented by the different color blocks. One is slightly shaded, one is very shaded, and the other one is black. These represents the different side chain and different molecules inside them. Therefore, D is the correct answer. Okay, we have reached to the end of the questions, and this will be the end of the video. Thank you for watching, And if you have any questions or doubts, please leave them in the comments down below. So yeah, for people who are answering the IGCSE examinations in the October-November series, good luck, and prepare early. The sooner you prepare early, the better it is. Okay, so until I see you in the next video, bye.